The buzz of fluorescent lights overhead filled the silence. It was a sound Emma Calhoun knew well. Almost comforting now. She'd spent the last 6 years moving between night shifts in 3 different hospitals. But tonight was different. This was her first shift back since Ava died. Briarcliff Rehabilitation Center stood on the edge of town, nestled against a line of dark pine trees that always looked half buried in mist. It was the kind of place people didn't talk about, not because of horror stories, but because it had simply faded from memory. The facility was mostly used to care for the elderly, long-term coma patients, and occasionally, the mentally ill. A hybrid place. Quiet. Isolated. And that was exactly what Emma had needed. Dr. Holman, the man who hired her, had emphasized it during the interview, nothing too strenuous. We just need someone reliable during nights. One hall's still closed for renovations, hasn't been used since the 80s. Now, standing in her new scrubs at the empty front desk, she found herself staring down a long, silent hallway. West Wing, rooms 301 to 315. The last door on the left was marked with a red X. She'd noticed it during her brief walk-through earlier. She hadn't asked about it. Something told her she didn't want to. She glanced at the log sheet. No patients were housed in that hall tonight. Still, she could feel the pull. Emma poured herself some instant coffee in the break room and looked at the photo tucked behind her ID badge. A girl, maybe 7 or 8, smiling in a pumpkin patch. Light blonde hair tied in crooked pigtails. Ava. Her chest ached. It had only been 5 months since the accident. People said time would make it easier. But it didn't. It just dulled the edges, left a constant hum of pain beneath everything. The therapist had suggested returning to routine might help. So here she was. Drinking terrible coffee. Waiting for something, anything, to occupy her mind. At exactly 12:03 a.m., the call light on room 305 blinked once. Then room 307. Then room 309. Each light buzzed red for less than a second, flickering like faulty bulbs. Emma leaned forward. According to her paperwork, those rooms weren't assigned to any current patient. Her radio crackled. She lifted it to her mouth. Maintenance. This is Calhoun, Night RN. I'm seeing strange call light activity on West Wing. Anyone doing work down here? Nothing. She checked again. The lights were dark now. Just a glitch, she told herself. Old building. Maybe electrical surges. Then she heard it. A child crying. Faint. From far down the corridor. A single wailing sob that echoed, wet and hoarse. Emma stood slowly. She checked her tablet. There were no pediatric patients on site. She moved carefully down the hallway, the rubber soles of her shoes whispering against the floor. Room 313 loomed ahead, the one with the red X on the door. The crying stopped. She hesitated. Then, to her surprise, she saw a key hanging from the doorframe. A thin, antique skeleton key tied with twine. It looked out of place, like something out of an old hotel. She reached out and touched it. The cold shocked her fingers. But something compelled her. She slid it into the old lock. It turned with a heavy click. The door creaked open. She flicked her flashlight on. Inside was nothing but darkness, and a child's music box, still turning, playing a melody she hadn't heard since Ava's funeral. Her knees buckled. She stepped back. And the door slammed shut behind her. Emma slammed her shoulder against the door. Once. Twice. It didn't budge. She scrambled for her radio. "This is Nurse Calhoun. I need assistance in the West Wing, room 313. I'm locked in, hello." Static. She tried again. Nothing but a high, whining hiss like a cassette tape left too long in a hot car. Then, silence. The only sound now was the soft, mechanical melody spinning from the music box in the center of the room. Emma's breath caught in her throat. That song, Ava's song, wasn't real. She'd made it up herself. A tune she hummed when brushing her daughter's hair at night, when trying to lull her to sleep after nightmares. No one else could have known it. She knelt and stared at the music box. It was small, wooden, painted with roses. She'd never seen it before in her life. But the melody was perfect. Every note. Emma's hands trembled as she reached for it, only for the box to suddenly stop, on its own. The silence left her heart racing even faster than the sound had. She stood again, sweeping her flashlight around the room. The walls were bare, cracked in places. No windows. No furniture, except a rusted metal bed frame pressed into one corner, its mattress stripped and stained. On the wall across from it, someone had carved something deep into the plaster. Words. She stepped closer. "They keep them here." A rush of cold air brushed her neck like breath. Emma spun around, flashlight beam slicing the dark. Nobody. But she saw it now, out of the corner of her eye. A shape. A child-sized figure standing just beyond the doorway in the hallway. But, the hallway wasn't there anymore. The door had vanished. The room no longer had an entrance. Just 4 solid walls. Emma's pulse pounded in her ears. She backed into the corner near the music box, blinking fast, whispering to herself, "You're tired. It's trauma. Sleep-deprived hallucinations. You need air." But her body wasn't buying it. The air had shifted. Thicker. Like breathing through wet cloth. Every part of her felt alert, as if something was watching her from behind a mirror. Then she noticed the mirror. Small. Square. Half broken. It leaned against the far wall, behind the bed frame. And in it, she wasn't alone. The reflection showed her, standing, terrified. But beside her, visible only in the glass, was a little girl. A girl with wet, matted hair. Pale skin like wax. She stood silently, head bowed, barefoot in a hospital gown far too big for her frame. Ava? No. The face was wrong. Lips too wide. Eyes too dark. And the expression, asterisk. Smiling, asterisk. Emma didn't look away. "What do you want?" she whispered. The girl tilted her head. And behind her, in the mirror's reflection, the door was still there. Wide open. Emma lunged for it. But in the real world, her hand struck only wall. Solid. She spun back. The mirror cracked again, this time on its own, a spiderweb fracture splitting across the little girl's face. Then everything snapped back. The wall behind Emma trembled. A sudden wind rushed through the room, as if something had punched into the air itself. The music box began spinning again, on its own. The door behind her reappeared with a low groan. She didn't question it. Emma ran. She didn't stop until she was back at the nurse's station, slamming the emergency call button. Moments later, a night orderly appeared, Marcus, maybe in his 40s, sleepy-eyed and confused. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." There was a child. In room 313. Marcus blinked. "What room?" 313, down the west wing." He frowned. "There is no room 313, Miss Calhoun. That room was sealed off decades ago. It was demolished after the fire. There's nothing but a wall there now." Emma turned toward the hallway. The door was gone. Emma didn't sleep the next day. She tried. She showered, made tea, sat on her couch with the TV on low, eyes locked blankly on an old cooking show. But her mind wouldn't let go of it, the door that vanished, the mirror, the girl. That song. Most of all, she kept hearing Marcus's voice. That room was sealed off after the fire. She hadn't asked more. She hadn't needed to. Because part of her already knew. When Emma arrived at Briarcliff that night for her second shift, she walked in early, before the other staff arrived. She had one goal in mind. The building's blueprint archive was kept in the third-floor admin closet. She found the key in the head nurse's drawer and flicked through the files under flickering ceiling lights, searching floor plans labeled West Wing. At last, she found it, a yellowing blueprint dated April 1979. There it was, room 313, clearly labeled. But stapled to the back was a single sheet of paper marked with the state hospital seal. Notice of closure. Following the incident on March 22, room 313 is hereby decommissioned. All patient records connected to the incident are to be sealed under State Order 1980-22A. Entry strictly prohibited without administrative clearance and safety personnel present. Emma's fingers trembled. There was a signature at the bottom, Dr. Kenneth Holman. The same man who hired her. Later that night, the halls were quiet again. Emma pretended to review her patient charting, but her eyes kept drifting to the corridor. West Wing. She felt it again. That pull. Not fear, exactly. Something more complicated. She thought of Ava. How she'd cried that night in the car before the crash, saying she didn't want to go back to school. How Emma had snapped at her, just once. Just enough to sting. She thought of how she never got to say sorry. That aching silence. That guilt. Room 313 had pulled that out of her. It wasn't just terror, it was memory. Grief made real. And she needed to know why. At 1:11 a.m., the whispers began. Soft, like breath in a tunnel. She heard them through the air vent above her desk. A child's voice. "Please. I'm still in here." Emma's skin crawled. She looked up. The vent was old, painted over several times. She stood on her chair and leaned toward it. "I don't like the dark anymore." A chill ran across her scalp. She turned and followed the sound. West Wing was dead silent again. The lights above flickered once. Then again. She passed room 309. 311, then stood in front of bare wall. No door. Just smooth plaster where room 313 had been the night before. But the whispers were clearer now. She pressed her ear to the wall. "They said you would come back." She staggered backward, heart pounding. Emma had no key this time. But she didn't need one. The wall was soft. Not drywall. Something else. She pressed her palm flat. And the wall pushed back. Like something breathing beneath it. Emma didn't sleep again. Instead, she requested access to the basement records vault the next day, claiming she wanted to study old patient trends for a continuing education program. The clerk barely looked up. Most of the folders were falling apart. Yellowing. Mold-smelling. But she found what she was looking for, an incident report from March 22, 1979. It read, "Patient, unknown female, approximate, 6 years old, unregistered. Admitted, March 18, 79, placed in isolation, room 313. Notes. Patient exhibits extreme anxiety, selective mutism, and photophobia. No known guardian. Arrived after being found wandering near Ridgemont Elementary with no memory of her name. Incident. On the night of March 22, staff reported hearing violent screaming from 313. Upon entry, room was empty. No sign of forced exit. Wall was sealed behind bed frame. Patient missing. Door locked from outside. The final sentence chilled her to her core. No record of a girl matching her description exists in any state database. That night, Emma returned to West Wing again. She knew what would happen. She wanted it to. She stood where the door had once been and whispered, "I'm sorry." And the wall opened. The wall didn't open like a door. It peeled. The plaster buckled, pulling inward as if the building itself were exhaling. Emma watched in frozen disbelief as a vertical seam split down the center of the wall and peeled back, revealing a narrow, pitch-black hallway where there should have been solid foundation. A hallway that couldn't exist. The air that poured out smelled ancient, like mildew, wet stone, and something worse, the coppery sting of old blood. Emma hesitated only a second. Then she stepped inside. The corridor behind room 313 was narrow enough to brush her shoulders, the walls rough and uneven like carved rock. Pipes jutted from the ceiling, some still dripping water that splashed cold against her arms. Her flashlight flickered. She stopped. Far ahead, at the edge of the beam, a silhouette moved. Small. Childlike. A little girl stood barefoot on the stone floor, facing away. Her hair was damp, tangled. Her hospital gown hung loosely, brushing her calves. She didn't move. Didn't turn. Emma's throat closed. The girl was humming. The same tune. The same song from the music box. Emma stepped forward. "Hello." The humming stopped. Slowly, the girl turned her head, only part way. "I told you," she whispered. "I don't like the dark anymore." Emma's chest tightened. "Who are you?" The girl said nothing. But behind her, in the dark, something else stirred. A scraping sound. Then another voice, lower, rasping, echoed through the tunnel. "She's not yours to take." Emma backed up. The girl turned fully now, and Emma's blood ran cold. Her eyes were gone. Not gouged. Not empty sockets. Just skin, smooth where eyes should have been. But somehow, she could still see. And she was smiling. Emma turned and ran. The corridor behind her had changed. It wasn't the smooth plaster passage anymore. The walls were lined with metal doors, hundreds of them, each with a tiny square window and numbers scratched above the frames. 306. 308. 310. but they weren't in order. Some repeated. Some overlapped. The passage pulsed. A low thump-thump sound, like a heartbeat, began pounding through the floor beneath her feet. Behind her, the girl giggled. "You're close now," she whispered. "It's almost ready." Emma didn't ask what it was. She just ran. When she burst back into the real West Wing hallway, the opening behind her snapped shut like a mouth. The walls solidified instantly. No seam. No crack. Just plaster. She collapsed against it, gasping. For a moment, all was silent. Then, "Miss Calhoun." Dr. Holman's voice, coming around the corner. She staggered upright, brushing dust from her scrubs. He looked her over. "You're bleeding," he said, concerned. She glanced down. Her arm was sliced from elbow to wrist, a thin cut dripping steadily. She hadn't even noticed. I must have caught it on a vent or something. I'm okay." He stared at her for a long moment. "I think we need to talk." They sat in the break room. Holman poured them both tea. "I hired you because I read your file," he said quietly. "I know about your daughter." Emma said nothing. He sipped. "I also know that grief can open doors. That's why I've never told anyone the full truth about room 313. Emma met his eyes. "You knew." He nodded. "I was here in '79. A medical intern. I saw the girl. No one ever found out who she was. She disappeared, into a wall. I know how it sounds. I know." "Then why did you send me down there?" she snapped. "I didn't," he said. "But the hospital did." She blinked. "What?" "The building, it doesn't want to be forgotten. Every decade or so, it calls someone. Always someone grieving. Someone fractured." His voice softened. "It doesn't want help. It wants company." Emma didn't go back the next night. She sat in her apartment with the lights off, the photo of Ava resting face down on the coffee table. She couldn't look at it. She couldn't stop hearing the girl's voice either. "I don't like the dark anymore." The words had followed her home. Not just in her head, but in the real world. The bathroom mirror fogged with those same words written in condensation. Her kitchen radio, unplugged, briefly flicked on, playing that same humming tune. It wasn't grief. It wasn't madness. It was real. And the thing inside room 313 had found her. On the third night, she returned to Briarcliff. Not for work. She didn't clock in. She didn't wear scrubs. She brought a flashlight, her phone, a rosary she hadn't touched in years, and Ava's locket. It still held a tiny strand of her daughter's hair. And for the first time since Ava's death, Emma tucked the locket into her front pocket and whispered, "Stay close to me, sweetheart." The lights in the West Wing flickered as she passed. The hallway was waiting. Room 313 had no visible door again, but she knew better now. She placed her palm against the plaster, closed her eyes, and whispered, "I'm ready." It peeled open without a sound. The darkness inside wasn't empty this time. A hallway again. But different. Wider. Cleaner. White tile floor. Walls painted pale green like an old children's ward. She could hear machines, beeping monitors, soft overhead announcements, though she couldn't make out the words. Down the corridor were doors. one every few feet, each marked with a name. Lisa M., age 8. Andrew C., age 5. Sophia D., age 6. Each door had a slot with paper medical notes, long faded. Children's rooms. At the far end was a different door. Black. Metal. Bolted shut. No nameplate. She stepped toward it, but a door to her right opened softly before she reached it. Room 314. Inside sat a girl on the floor with her back to Emma, her fingers busy twisting something, a string, maybe. No. Hair. The girl was tying locks of long black hair into a noose. Emma whispered, "Hello." The girl turned. No eyes. Only skin stretched tight over her sockets. Emma gasped. But the girl just smiled. "Do you remember what you said to her? That last day?" Emma's blood went cold. "What?" "To Ava. Before the car hit you." The voice wasn't a whisper anymore. It was inside her head. "You told her to grow up. That she was being dramatic. You snapped." Emma backed out of the room. The girl didn't follow. "You're here because you want to be punished," the voice called after her. "You want to find her. But you're too late." She staggered back into the hall, hand against the wall to steady herself. The black metal door at the end of the corridor groaned. Then it opened. Inside was nothing but darkness. And a voice whispered, "She's waiting." Emma stepped inside. The door slammed shut behind her. Total blackness. No walls. No floor. Just space. She stood still until her flashlight flickered on by itself, casting a beam onto the far corner. There, on a hospital bed, sat the same girl. Blank eyes. That awful smile. Emma whispered, "You're not her." The girl tilted her head. "No. But I remember her." "What do you mean?" "She's still here." Emma's heart skipped. "Ava?" "No," the girl replied. "She is what this place made from you." And then the girl stood up, her skin beginning to crack, flaking like old paper. Her hair peeled back. Her mouth widened until it split her cheeks. And something else crawled out of her skin. It wasn't just the girl anymore. As the skin sloughed off her body like a shed cocoon, what stepped forward was something much older, gaunt and tall, joints bent at wrong angles, with fingers too long and a face like melted wax frozen mid-scream. Its eye sockets were deep but empty, its lips shriveled around teeth too sharp, too many. It smelled like rot and sorrow. Emma stumbled back, hitting the invisible wall behind her. The thing smiled wider. Not at her. Through her. "I remember your daughter," it said in a voice that sounded like damp pages being torn apart. "She cried when you died." Emma froze. "What? You don't remember, do you?" it hissed. "You think this is real? That you're still in the hospital? But you never left that road. The windshield. The blood. The crunch." Emma's mind reeled. Ava's scream. The oncoming headlights. The silence afterward. She'd always assumed she survived. She remembered the hospital, the grief counseling, returning to work. But now, those memories felt patched. Stitched together by something else. Something unnatural. "I'm not dead," she whispered. The creature's grin widened further. You are. The room pulsed. The walls breathed. Behind the creature, mirrors began to form out of the darkness, tall, silver-edged panels blinking into existence, one after another, forming a circular ring. In each, Emma saw reflections of herself, broken, twisted versions. One weeping blood. One reaching through the glass with blackened hands. One lying still and cold in a hospital bed. But one stood out. In the far right mirror, Ava stood smiling, alive, in her old room. Sunlight streamed through the window behind her. She held her favorite rabbit plush. She was humming. Emma surged forward, but the creature grabbed her arm, claws digging deep. "You don't get to leave," it snarled. "You brought this. You opened the door. You fed it with your grief. You made me." Emma cried out, wrenching her arm away, stumbling toward the mirror. The surface rippled. She slammed her palm against it. "Ava." The girl looked up, smiled. Then her smile faded. "Mommy," she mouthed. The glass solidified. Cold. Impossibly thick. Behind her, the creature howled. Emma spun. The walls around her were splitting, cracks forming from floor to ceiling. More of them were crawling through, hollow ones. Children with missing faces. Nurses with no mouths. Twisted bodies made of grief and ash. But she saw it now. They weren't trying to harm her. They were trapped. All of them. Emma gritted her teeth. She turned toward the center mirror, the one showing Ava. "If this is a prison, if I'm dead, then why is she still here?" "She's the only part of you that's still alive," a new voice said. Dr. Holman. He stepped forward from the shadows, but he looked different now, younger, in a long white coat with a name tag that read Resident, 1979. "I tried to stop it back then. I couldn't. But maybe you can." He pointed toward the locket around Emma's neck. "She's waiting for you. She's always been waiting." The creature screamed again, but this time it sounded afraid. Emma gripped the locket. It pulsed in her hand like a heartbeat. She whispered her daughter's name. The mirrors shattered. Light exploded through the room. And everything went white. When Emma opened her eyes, she was lying in a hospital bed. The white ceiling above her was cracked slightly, the kind she remembered from real rooms, not the living walls of room 313. At first, she thought it might all have been a dream. A hallucination. But her arm still ached from where the creature had clawed her. And her daughter's locket was gone. Emma sat up slowly. The room was quiet. Clean. Peaceful. A tray of untouched food sat on a table beside her, though she didn't remember ordering it. The 4 in her arm hummed faintly. She blinked. A young nurse entered. A man. Cheerful. Warm. "Welcome back," he said. "You gave us quite a scare." Emma's throat was dry. "Where am I?" "St. Augustine's. You were brought in 6 days ago. Found unconscious near the outskirts of Briarcliff, covered in dust. They thought it was exposure. Dehydration. But your vitals were fine." Emma didn't respond. "Someone from the old facility found you," the nurse added. "An older man. Said you might have had a psychiatric break." Emma clenched her hands in her lap. "Holman." The nurse blinked. "I'm sorry. Dr. Kenneth Holman." He was my supervisor. There's no one by that name on staff. And according to Briarcliff's records, there hasn't been for over 20 years. Their files show he died in 2004. That night, Emma stayed awake. There was a door at the end of her hospital bed. A perfectly normal door. Probably led to the bathroom. But it looked exactly like the one from room 313. Even the scuff marks on the bottom panel were identical. She tried not to stare at it. But around 3:13 a.m., she heard a knock. 3 slow raps. She stood slowly. Who's there? No answer. Then, a child's voice. Muffled. Familiar. Mommy? Her heart nearly stopped. She crossed the room and pressed her ear to the wood. Ava, she whispered. I'm scared. It's dark again. You said you wouldn't leave. Emma choked back a sob. Her knees buckled. No. No, you're safe now. You're with Grandma. You're home. This isn't home. Not without you. The doorknob began to turn. Emma backed away. The fluorescent light above her began flickering. Her monitor beeped erratically, flatlined once, then stabilized. Then, the door opened. And standing there was Ava. Not ghostly. Not hollow-eyed. Just Ava. Her daughter. In the yellow sundress she'd been buried in. Her blonde hair messy. Eyes wet. Mommy, she said, voice trembling. Emma stood frozen. I miss you, Ava whispered. Emma's tears fell freely now. I'm sorry, she said. I never meant to hurt you. Not that night. Not ever. I know. Ava took one step forward. The hallway behind her was dark. But she was made of light. She opened her small hand. The locket sat in her palm. Emma reached for it. Suddenly, the lights exploded. The walls trembled. Something roared behind the hallway, deep, guttural, angry. The shadow returned. That thing from room 313. It was coming. Ava screamed. The locket slipped from her hand, sliding across the floor. Emma dove. Just as the creature lunged from the darkness, spindly, mouth wide, arms outstretched. Emma clutched the locket. And the world shattered. Emma hit the ground hard. Cold stone. Her breath fogged the air as she scrambled to her knees, blinking against the sudden dark. The hospital room was gone again. She was back in the corridor behind room 313. Only this time, it was worse. Everything had decayed. The hallway sloped unnaturally, like it had warped under the weight of time. The walls were cracked open in jagged lines. Fluids leaked from rusted pipes. Doors swung loosely on broken hinges. But what chilled her most was the silence. No humming. No whispers. No cries. Just the sound of her own breath and the slow, distant drip, drip, drip of water. She rose slowly, clutching the locket in her hand. It was warm. Still beating. She walked forward. The names on the doors were gone now. Instead, numbers were burned into the walls, carved in sharp, frantic strokes. 999. 998. 997. Each door had a slat. She looked through one. Nothing. Another. Nothing. But at the door marked 996, she saw a boy, maybe 10, lying in the fetal position on a metal cot, rocking slowly. His eyes met hers. "Are you the nurse?" he asked, voice faint. Emma's hand shook. "No. I'm looking for my daughter." "They said someone new was coming," the boy murmured. "They said there was still room." "Room where?" He didn't answer. Instead, he pointed down the hallway. Toward the last door. Emma walked slowly. As she neared the end, the numbers stopped. No markings. Just a blank metal door with an old-fashioned latch. Above it, burned into the wall, were 3 words. "Room for one." She opened it. Inside was a circular room, cracked tile, mirrors lining every wall, broken beds lining the edges like a ward for the forgotten. A low moan echoed through the space. She stepped in, and the door shut behind her. In the center of the room stood a bed. Clean. White sheets. The only one untouched by dust or rot. On it lay Ava. Perfect. Sleeping. Emma rushed forward. She cupped her daughter's face. Warm. "Ava, baby, wake up." Ava's eyes opened. Brown. Wide. Confused. "You came back," she said. Emma's tears fell again. "Yes. I'm here. I never should have left you." "You didn't," Ava whispered. "They took me. Because you opened the door." Emma gripped her hand. "Then we're leaving. Together." But Ava didn't move. "The others can't leave," she said. "You'll have to stay in their place." Emma froze. "The hollow ones. The trapped. That's the rule. One in, one out." Behind her, the mirrors flickered. Reflections of other children stared out, silent, desperate. Some had faces. Most didn't. Emma looked down at her daughter. She understood now. This place fed on absence. On love. On pain. And she had been feeding it ever since the day Ava died. "I'll stay," Emma whispered. Ava's eyes filled with tears. "No," she said. "You have to go. It only works if they choose to leave." Suddenly, the mirrors shattered. The air trembled. The ground split. The creature returned, massive now, barely contained by the walls, stitched together from the memories of all it had consumed. "You don't get to leave," it growled. "You're mine." But behind Emma, the children were stepping out of the mirrors, hundreds of them. Silent. Pale. Empty-eyed. And they were no longer afraid. They began to speak as one. "We remember." The creature howled. The room shook violently. Ava grabbed her mother's hand and pressed the locket into it again. "You found me, Mommy," she whispered. "And now you can let me go." The walls were collapsing now, splintering into dust as the hollow ones advanced. Not with vengeance. With release. Each child that stepped from the mirror carried the shape of sorrow, but their eyes held something else now, memory. Identity. Bits of who they used to be, stitched together through Emma's presence, through the crack her grief had opened. The creature, the thing built of loss, regret, and silence, lashed out. But the children didn't run. They surrounded it. Tiny hands. Shaking voices. Bare feet on tile. They whispered their names. One by one. Sarah, Isaiah, Mina, Lucas. And each name made the creature flinch. Each one pulled at its seams. Emma clutched Ava close. She felt the girl's warmth, but it wasn't heat. It was a flicker. A last glow before fading. "Don't go," Emma whispered. But Ava only smiled. "I have to. It's my turn now. You're just a little girl." "I was," Ava said. "But I've waited long enough." Emma wanted to scream, to pull her back, to hold her forever. But then she looked around. The children were moving toward the center of the room, toward the bed. One by one, they climbed into it. A boy with a cracked skull. A girl missing a hand. A toddler with burns down her side. They curled together, like siblings huddling on a stormy night. And the sheets pulled over them on their own. Emma stepped back, her breath caught in her throat. Ava was the last to lie down. "Where will you go?" Emma asked, her voice barely more than air. "I don't know," Ava said. "But I think it's warm there." "Will I see you again?" Ava paused. Then reached out. She placed the locket in Emma's palm, and whispered. "Only in dreams." The room flashed. A pulse like thunder. The creature roared one last time. Then shattered, disintegrating into dust and smoke. Its screen collapsed into itself, pulled downward through a crack in the earth that snapped shut like a sealed wound. Silence returned. The mirrors faded to gray. The walls repaired themselves. And the bed was empty. Perfectly made. Emma stood alone. She didn't remember waking up. But she opened her eyes to sunlight streaming through her apartment window. The locket sat on the table. Still warm. Still whole. She picked it up and found something new inside. A second hair. Short. Blonde. Brighter than the one she'd saved. She didn't cry. She smiled. That morning, she walked to the cemetery. Ava's grave looked the same, weathered stone, overgrown grass. Emma knelt and placed the locket beneath it. Then she whispered a promise. "You are not forgotten." That night, she slept for the first time in over a year. And dreamed of a field with tall grass. Ava ran through it, laughing. Barefoot. Unafraid. And at the top of the hill stood a house with one window lit. Inside was a bed. A real one. Empty. Waiting. But for now. No one needed it. 1 month passed. Emma didn't return to Briarcliff. She filed her resignation quietly, mailed it in with no forwarding address. She left the town altogether, moved south, closer to the coast, to a place where the air didn't hang heavy with memory. But some things still followed. Dreams, mostly. Not nightmares, though they felt like echoes of one. She'd wake sometimes with the soft pressure of a hand around her own, too small to be adult, too still to be present. A child's hand. But she never pulled away. She always whispered the same thing into the darkness. "I remember you." One gray afternoon in mid-November, Emma received a padded envelope with no return address. Inside was a single patient chart, old and faded. The front read, "Patient, room 313, transferred March 22, 1979. There was no name. No diagnosis. Just a one-line note scribbled at the bottom of the final page in shaky handwriting. Not gone. Waiting. Doors don't stay shut forever. Emma's hands trembled. She flipped to the back of the file. Taped inside was a photograph. A hallway. She recognized it instantly, West Wing. And there, at the far end, barely visible, was a door. New paint. New number. 313. Later that week, Emma returned to the hospital. Not Briarcliff. That place had since been condemned, sealed by court order after structural concerns were raised by state officials. No, this was St. Augustine's, where she had awakened after that final confrontation. It was an excuse, really. She told herself she was just checking in, visiting the nurse who had cared for her. But she asked to see the long-term ward. Her heart skipped as they passed a corridor on the south wing. A line of empty rooms. Closed doors. The walls were clean. Nothing ominous. Except one door halfway down. Fresh paint. Brushed stainless steel number plate. Room 313. Emma stopped walking. The nurse guiding her didn't notice, just kept talking about the new renovations, the expanded pediatric unit. But Emma was frozen in place. Because she felt it. Again. The pull. The air felt thicker here. Colder. Not dangerous. Just waiting. That night, Emma returned after visiting hours. She wore old sneakers. Brought nothing but a flashlight and the envelope. The hallway was quiet. Too quiet for a modern hospital. She stood before room 313. A soft breeze brushed her cheek, though the air was still. Then she heard it. A music box melody. Faint. Familiar. She didn't knock. She opened the door. Inside was a small, windowless room. Empty. White tile. No bed. Just a chair, bolted to the center of the floor. And on that chair sat a clipboard. She stepped forward, legs trembling. On the clipboard, a single sheet. Blank, except for one word. Welcome. And beneath it, a fresh line written in neat, childlike print. There's room now. Emma backed away. The door closed behind her. Emma didn't sleep that night. She left the hospital quickly, quietly, and drove without direction until dawn bled into the sky. At a rest stop near the county line, she finally pulled over and wept. The room hadn't spoken. Nothing had attacked her. But it had known her name. There was no doubt anymore, room 313 wasn't just a location. It was a threshold. A hinge between worlds. Between life and death. Between memory and the things we try to forget. And now, it was following her. Back in her apartment, she pulled out a legal pad and began writing everything: names, dates, voices, moments. The locket. Ava. Holman. The creature. The children. The dreams. She needed to organize it. Prove it had structure. Rules. Somewhere near the bottom of the page, she wrote. Room 313 isn't a place. It's a wound. Underneath, she added. And wounds reopen. That night, she tried something different. She placed Ava's photo beside her bed. Not face down. Not hidden. She whispered, "You can come if you want. But only if it's really you." No dreams came. But she woke in the morning to the scent of lavender. And beside the photo, a new object sat on her nightstand. A key. Old. Brass. Familiar. The one from the door that first night. And tied around it was a string of yellow yarn. Ava's favorite color. Emma called St. Augustine's. Asked about room 313. The administrator hesitated. That wing is under re-evaluation, he said. There have been irregularities. Emma pressed. What kind? Equipment failure. Temperature fluctuations. Staff refusals to enter. We even had a priest bless it last week. That made her pause. What happened? Nothing. The administrator sounded tight. But he didn't finish. Said the room wasn't empty. Emma's throat tightened. Can I come back? She asked. Silence. Then, it's your name on the file. I can't stop you. That evening, she returned. This time she brought nothing but herself, and the key. The hallway was quieter than ever. She passed the rooms with growing dread, counting them like footsteps toward a grave. 310. 311. 312. She stood outside 313. Waited. Nothing happened. Until she touched the knob. It turned on its own. The room inside was different again. No chair. No clipboard. No tile. Just a wide open space with walls made of bookshelves, floor of soft carpet, and in the center, a child's bed. Emma stepped in, stunned. It was Ava's room. Down to the stuffed rabbit, the old nightlight, the blanket her grandmother had knit. Every detail. But Ava wasn't in it. Instead, on the bed, sat a stack of drawings. Crayons. Bright colors. Scribbled names. Emma picked up the first. A little boy with a big smile and a red balloon. The second, two girls holding hands near a lake. The third, Ava, in her yellow sundress, standing beneath a tree with her arms outstretched. And on the back of that page, in crooked letters, "Thank you for remembering us." Emma sat down on the bed and cried until her chest emptied. This wasn't punishment. It was a message. A place filled with what people had lost. Forgotten. Room 313 didn't steal children. It preserved them. Because the world had stopped looking. She left the hospital that night with a strange peace. Not closure. But purpose. The air smelled of rain when Emma stepped outside. She walked slowly through the parking lot of St. Augustine's, fingers still wrapped around the drawings she'd found in Ava's room. They rustled softly, like a child breathing in their sleep. That night, she didn't go home. She booked a small cabin by the edge of the woods, no signal, no Wi-Fi, no distractions. Just a fire, a journal, and a room with one bed and one door. There, she began writing letters. Not to people. To names. Names she'd read in old files, scribbled on doors, whispered by forgotten mouths in room 313. To Sarah, age 7. You had freckles and liked purple. I saw your name scratched on a wall. I'm sorry no one looked for you. To Mina, age 4. Your drawing of the sun made me cry. It had 7 rays. Ava used to draw them the same way. I hung yours above my bed. To Lucas, age 6. I found your toy truck in the hallway. Still red. Still yours. With every letter, the cabin felt warmer. Like something was watching. Not haunting. Listening. On the fifth night, Emma dreamed of the corridor again. But this time, it wasn't broken or bleeding. It was whole. Clean. The children stood in a line beside their doors, each holding a candle. Their eyes were bright. Unafraid. At the far end stood Ava. Smiling. Not sad. Not lost. Just waiting. Emma walked to her. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. She knelt and held her daughter, warm in her arms. When she woke, she was crying, but it didn't hurt anymore. Emma mailed the letters. One to each name. All addressed the same way. Room 313. Care of the ones who remember. No return address. Just hope. A week later, a package arrived at her door. No name. Inside, a single manila folder. And inside that, one chart. Emma Calhoun. Date of birth. Blood type. Emergency contact, Ava Calhoun. At the bottom, in fine print. Admitted. Room 313, expected stay, temporary. She stared at it for a long time. Then she opened her journal and wrote. There is one last patient. Me. But not yet. For now, I will remember. She became a nurse again. But not in hospitals. She worked in homes, with grieving families, with children who couldn't speak, who refused to sleep. The kind who whispered into vents and stared at doors no one else saw. She listened. And she told them a story. About a door at the end of a long hallway. A room that didn't exist on any blueprint. And a little girl who waited there, until someone finally remembered. The wind howled across the empty hill. Emma stood at the crest, coat flapping, hair loose in the fading light. Below, the trees shivered like tall, frightened children. The road behind her was long gone now, no tracks, no pavement, only memory. She didn't bring a bag. No food. No phone. Only the chart. Her name on the front. Ava's name at the bottom. She'd spent years writing letters, remembering children no one else remembered, walking into houses where grief had bloomed in silence. She'd sat beside hospital beds where the machines kept beating but the hearts had long stopped hoping. And every time, she had whispered. You're not lost. You're just waiting. Tonight, she'd felt it stronger than ever. The pull. But this time, there was no fear. Just readiness. At the top of the hill stood a single structure. Not quite a house. Not quite a hospital. White walls, a tiled roof, windows with no glass. It looked like a memory half recalled. She stepped inside. The hallway was familiar. Of course it was. West Wing. Rooms 301 to 315. She passed 301. 303, 307. She smiled faintly as she passed the door marked 309, it was open, and inside sat a girl braiding a headless doll's hair, humming quietly. She waved. The girl waved back. At the end of the hall, room 313 waited. This time, there was no red X. Only a plaque. Calhoun, Emma, temporary stay approved. The door opened before she touched it. Inside was a bed. One bed. And beside it, a chair. Not cold or sterile. Wooden. Worn. Ava sat in it, legs swinging. She looked up and beamed. Took you long enough. Emma chuckled, voice catching in her throat. I wasn't sure I'd be ready. Ava stood and reached for her hand. You remember. I never stopped. Ava nodded. Then we can go. Emma frowned. Go where? But Ava didn't answer. She just turned. Behind the far wall, a door opened. Warm golden light spilled in. Not harsh. Not blinding. Home. Emma turned back to the bed. The clipboard lay waiting. One last note written in Ava's handwriting. Thank you for making room. She walked through the final door with her daughter. And as it closed gently behind them, room 313 faded into quiet. Another child entered it the next day. Sat down. Waited. And found their name written on a wall by a hand that remembered them. In a hospital across the country, a little girl woke from a 3-year coma. The doctors were stunned. Her mother screamed. Her father fell to his knees. The girl's first words were, "The lady in room 313 said I could come back."